I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and today I have the pleasure to connect to Sydney, to Dr. Mark Van Rijmenam. I don't know, I think I've killed your name. What's your last name, Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Effie. My last name is Van Rijmenam, but everyone makes anything out of it, so that's all good.
Okay, so let me quickly try to say the many hats that you're wearing. You're a futurist. You have written 4 books. We'll be discussing today your new book about the metaverse with Wiley, and you are, I think, the first digital speaker that I know, at least, right? You have your digital avatar, who is the anchor of the tech journal. And of course, today we are going to be talking about digital twins and the metaverse. You're also the founder of Dataflock, which is a data analytics company, right? And again, you wear so many hats. They're all around innovation, and both from Web 2 and Web 3. I hope I gave justice to this briefing, Mark.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be in your show, Effie.
And again, congratulations for your new book. It's by Wiley, Step into the Metaverse. I think the subtitle is more important, as usual, than the title itself. And I keep 2 key words from it, the word of immersive and social economy. And I look forward to discussing with you these topics that are very important. Tell us, in your book, first of all, you talk about 6 main characteristics of the vision of the metaverse. Tell us those, walk us through those characteristics, please. And then I'd like to discuss with you and hear from you which ones are more at risk, or which ones have already taken a priority in the real world.
Sure, happy to do so, Effie. And so my book, Step into the Metaverse, really has been written as a blueprint for an open metaverse. And to write the book, I did 100 in-depth interviews with the stakeholders who are building this open metaverse, as well as another 150 surveys of people involved in building this metaverse. And that really helped me understand, one, what the metaverse is, because it's such a novel concept, but 2, also why it is so important that we are building an open metaverse. And I really want to stress that, because there's no guarantee that we will end up in an open metaverse. It might very well be that we will end up in a Ready Player One scenario, a Snow Crash scenario, where the metaverse is owned by a few big tech. And I think we should do whatever it takes to avoid that from happening. And that requires a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication from the developers who are building the metaverse, but also the consumers who are consuming the metaverse. And so indeed, in my book, I describe 6 characteristics of an open metaverse. And in a nutshell, so these are interoperability, decentralization, persistency, spatiality, community-driven, and self-sovereignty. And if I go through them briefly, so it means basically interoperability is first that we are able to take our assets, our data, our digital assets, our identity, from one platform to another. It means that we don't have to create a new account whenever we go to a new virtual world or an augmented experience, but also that we can take our assets that we collect or buy or win or whatsoever in those virtual worlds, and take them from one world to another. So we can take our wearables, our skins, from, let's say, Fortnite to, let's say, Minecraft, both, which is obviously not possible today, but in the future, hopefully, version of an open metaverse, it will be possible to take those assets from one platform to another. Now, to achieve that, what we need to have is decentralization. We need blockchain technology to enable it, so that we are in full control over our own data, our own assets, and our own identity, so that we determine who gets access to that data, where and how we can use it. And only once we have that decentralization, then it becomes possible to have that interoperability. Now, with decentralization...
Sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but I mean, because you're making it seem like blockchain is required. And what I hear from you is it's only required if we manage to build an open metaverse, but if we don't, it could be built without blockchain.
Absolutely. We don't need blockchain technology in a closed metaverse. There's no reason for crypto, there's no reason for NFTs, because in a closed metaverse, we have a centralized entity who controls the metaverse, and with that controls our digital lives. And the centralized entity can just determine, or you can move your assets between the virtual worlds that are connected to the centralized entity. And there's absolutely no need for blockchain for all of this. However, that means that we don't control our own data, we don't control our own assets. So if we do want to control the data and assets, then we need decentralization. Now, a third component to an open metaverse is persistency, which basically means that if we create something in this open metaverse, we want to be certain that if we buy or build, let's say, a house or a building, that the next day that house or building is still there. Just like in the physical world, when you come back from home, from work, you want your house to be there, and not that your neighbor demolished it because he didn't like you. And the same applies to the metaverse. Obviously, this comes also with challenges, because if you can't delete anything in the metaverse, I can put up a nasty billboard in a virtual world, and that then can also not be deleted. So that comes definitely with some challenges attached to it. Which is why it's so important to have the right governance and the right rules and regulation within a metaverse. Now, the fourth component is spatiality, which means that we are able to attach spatial anchors to whatever assets we have in the virtual world. To remind you, at the moment, it's not possible to find anything in the open metaverse, in the metaverse. Well, first of all, because the metaverse doesn't exist yet. But two, if you wanted to find, let's say, asset, I don't know, ABC in virtual world X, you can't just go to a search engine and see where that asset is, or for that matter, where your friend is, in which virtual world, and then within the virtual world, at which coordinates. So that's not possible. So we need spatial anchors to make that happen. Now, the fifth component is community-driven. And this very much refers to the social component I've mentioned in my title. Generation Z, Generation Alpha, they are the digital, they are the metaverse natives. And a community is everything, you have friends from all over the world. Globalization is not really a thing, because that's just the way you operate as a Generation Alpha. I think that community is so important, and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, are a big part of that. And as an organization, if you want to do something in the metaverse, you have to acknowledge those communities. The sixth component, and most likely even the most important component, I think, is self-sovereignty. Self-sovereignty of identity and self-sovereignty of reputation, which basically means you have full control over your own identity, and it's not possible for a centralized identity, because they don't like you, to just delete you. And I think, when we have a self-sovereign identity, we have identity which is portable, so you can move it from one place to another. It's persistent, cannot be deleted. It's protected, it cannot be hacked. It's private, and it's personal. So it's all about you, and anyone can't just get access to it without your approval. And I think if we have these six components, and what I always tell organizations when I help them understand the metaverse is, whatever you're going to do within the metaverse, try to embed these characteristics in whatever you are doing, because that's the only way we can achieve an open metaverse. And I think we should all want that, so we should do our best to achieve that.
Interesting. It seems to me that in our physical world, if we manage to build this type of metaverse with these principles, if you like, maybe we can learn from the metaverse and transform some of our practices in the physical world, especially related to identity and the rights around identity, as the world we know lives in a, the physical world. The rights of people to their identity and to their physical assets are not that democratic, if you want, as you're describing.
No, and unfortunately not. And it's been a real challenge because I first described the concept of self-sovereign identity in my second book, which was called Blockchain, in 2018. And that's now 4 years ago. And it's still an ongoing struggle, and it will probably be an ongoing struggle for the next 5 to 10 years before we manage to hopefully come to a solution where we have full control over our own identity. But I do think that it's absolutely crucial to strive for that.
Mark, from following you on LinkedIn and the content, I understand that you have a strong opinion around digital real estate. Can you share with us your point of view?
Yes, definitely. I definitely have a strong opinion on digital real estate, and I think it doesn't make sense. So, and it's quite funny because a couple of weeks ago, Mark Cuban said sort of the same thing. So I think he must have read my book. But I really don't think it makes sense to spend millions of dollars on a piece of scarce digital real estate in a virtual world that might not be there 2 years from now. First of all, because the digital world is infinite. We don't have any. We're not bound by the laws of physics. So I can understand you create artificial scarcity, but to pay millions of dollars for that, that doesn't make sense to me. Secondly, the current virtual worlds are really metaverse 0.1. I would say. It's Decentralized and Sandbox. They're cool environments. But this is not how the metaverse will look like 10 years from now. And because these are decentralized platforms, they're very difficult to upgrade. And if it's a centralized platform, digital real estate doesn't make sense at all, because then you're basically sponsoring a centralized entity. So by definition, because they are decentralized, they're difficult to upgrade. So for moving from a decentralized with a low polygon design to a hyper-realistic decentralized, that's going to be very, very hard work and might not guarantee to succeed. And in the meantime, other platforms might have come by who are doing much better. So that's also an issue. Then I mentioned the issue of persistency. You can buy a piece of land on Decentraland for $1 million, let's say, and I might not like you, so I buy the piece of land next to it, and I put up a very big billboard and saying something very nasty about Effie. There's nothing you can do about that, but your $1 million investment has just gone down the drain and is worth nothing anymore. So there are so many challenges adhere to virtual real estate, digital real estate, that I really do not believe in. And I think there are better solutions to combat spam and to get rid of bad actors, and to potentially also make some money as a startup, because there's nothing wrong with making money as a platform owner to build something. But I don't think that digital real estate is the right way to go.
Interesting. And the artificial scarcity that you mentioned is not protected by anything. I mean, it's artificial scarcity that some company has created, but can be copied and like it's happened in the DeFi world, right? Copying dApps and competing in a traditional way by offering higher rewards or better rewards and so on, and that game has a finite end.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. You can just if you're a bad actor, you can just create a virtual land and just continue to expand the land, and that's basically the same thing that happened in Second Life. Second Life did the same thing, and at some point, those who because it was continuously expanding, you had to buy land at the outer reaches of the land itself. And if you wanted to go there where it happened, it took you ages to get there. So this is not something that's new. This is we've been here before. So again, for me, buying digital real estate for millions of dollars is nonsense. And I'm pretty vocal about that.
Mark, share with us some thoughts around the challenges of digitalization in the metaverse. And what I mean is, in the physical world, we talk all the time about the digitalization challenges of existing businesses, right? Whether it's moving to the cloud or changing their business model, all that spectrum. Now, within the metaverse, we're talking about digitalization. You already mentioned some challenges of needing to upgrade, but what are the challenges in the digitalization in the metaverse? I know it's early, but could you give us some ideas around that?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the fact that it's early days, and the metaverse, as some of you might envision from the books of Ready Player One, is really still 5 to 7, if not 10 years away, and you can best compare the metaverse to the early days of the mobile web. When we had the first iPhone 3G and just had an app store. The apps that we had, that were highly popular then were apps that allowed you to drink beer with your iPhone by and then the glass would empty with a little bit of sound. Those were the apps that we were developing in 2008. And obviously, we laugh about those apps, but this is the same thing is happening today with the metaverse. It's super early days, and we're still exploring. We don't know what Apple is going to do with their headset. We don't know what kind of fantastic new AR glasses we're getting in 2, 3, 5 years from now. I've seen smart contact lenses already today. Well, imagine them 5 years from now when they are just super high tech devices that you can use without any problems. Connect an app store to it, and all of a sudden you have infinite layers that we can build on top of our physical reality. We cannot foresee really what we can expect them to happen and what kind of creativity we can expect people to come up with. So I think the biggest challenge for digitalization in the metaverse is starting today to understand what the metaverse is and means for your business, but don't think that this is the end game. This is early days, which I always advise organizations to step into the metaverse today to start to learn and explore and try to figure out what this all means. But it doesn't mean that this is the end game. It's like the start of the internet, the pets.com era that we are in, and I think that's what people need to be aware of. That some cool NFT campaigns, such as M&M's did recently with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, I believe. Those things are really cool. Or the $180 million that Nike sold using NFTs, really cool examples. And that's what I recommend companies to start doing. Start exploring these kind of initiatives to understand.
Yep.
What this means. And then, of course, when I say this, we're talking about, on the one hand, consumer brands, but on the other hand, we have the enterprise brands, the manufacturers who can use digital twins to start learning and interacting with the metaverse. And that's a whole different ballgame that they need to explore. The main challenge is, as I said, starting to understand what this means for you as a business.
Yeah. I've actually recently I wrote an article about Starbucks' intention to develop an NFT strategy, if you want, and as they are a major brand that has done so well in consumer loyalty, in the early days when mobile apps and ordering were very early. So, watching them, what they do with it, is something on my radar. And as you said, those are consumer brands. I can't even imagine what will happen with B2B. And I think we should not be mocking the different brands. We like to mock in the banking world, HSBC and JP Morgan about what they are doing in the metaverse, but it's really, positioning themselves and trying.
It's learning. Yeah, it's learning, and I think you should celebrate them for doing that, because the other result is becoming the blockbusters of today's world. Starting to explore what this all means, as I said, I spoke and interviewed and surveyed around 250 people for my book. I got 250 different definitions of what the metaverse means. The metaverse is very abstract for a lot of people. And the best way to understand what the metaverse is for your business is if you, as your business, start stepping into the metaverse, exploring what this means, because then you can really start to understand how the metaverse will impact your business. Of course, reading my book is a great starting point, but I think it's better, almost, I would say, to start really just doing this kind of stuff.
Yes, but having this blueprint, as you said, of what are the possibilities and how they could fit or be used in the business that is happening. Any thoughts or insights around the finance industry during your interviews? And finance is also very broad these days, right? Because finance is also delivered by non-banking entities and so on. Did you talk to people in the broad world of finance and got some feedback on the metaverse?
What I think when I look at finance in the metaverse, I think the industry is at the edge of major disruption. I think 10 years from now, the financial industry will look completely different, because in the metaverse, crypto is what will make the metaverse go round, as I always say. And the NFTs are playing such a major role here because NFTs, done correctly, they allow you to have full control over the assets that you have. But if you can prove the ownership of a digital asset, it means you can monetize a digital asset. Just like when in the real world, when you can prove the ownership of a house, that house moves from shelter to a way of investment. And I think that is what we're going to see happen in the metaverse, that owning and proving the ownership of digital assets will allow you to monetize that. And in order to monetize that, you're not going to use traditional financial instruments, you're going to use DeFi. You're able to monetize NFTs, sell them, borrow against them, fractionalize them, etc., but using decentralized finance mechanisms, not using using traditional finance mechanisms, because they are too slow, too expensive, and too cumbersome. And now, for all this to really happen, I think there's a lot of work to be done in the DeFi world, because one of the biggest problems in the DeFi world, I think, is that it has a massive UI and UX problem, because it's super difficult, super annoying to do something with, to drop an NFT in a DeFi protocol to borrow against it, just to put some buzzwords here in one sentence, is really difficult. And the average John Doe will not be able to do that. So if we want to make DeFi truly accessible, then we need to up our game from a UI and UX perspective, so that using DeFi becomes as easy as using your credit card online.
Yeah, and that's why I think the big consumer brands like Nike and Starbucks can at least familiarize the masses with holding a wallet with an NFT in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And if we manage to get those numbers at a mass scale, then we can start, adding features to it. So
Yeah.
I'm watching that type of metric of wallets with digital assets, even if they are of low value, but you familiarize yourself with a ticket, be it Ticketmaster or a reward, some reward from a Starbucks or
well, that's one thing where I see a massive potential for the financial industry, is to become a custodian of decentralized wallets, which seems really an oxymoron because it's centralizing the decentralized. But I think we'll have to, because again, John Doe will find it very difficult to protect his own private key, which holds his entire offline and digital life. People lose their passports and their phones all the time. So now imagine you turned your house into an NFT, and you want to drop your NFT into a DeFi protocol to get a mortgage, and you're doing the wrong thing. Did you then lose your house? Are you still liable for the mortgage? These kind of things are we need to solve these, and this is where I see a role for banks, because they have proven, I think, to the best extent compared to all the other industries, to be able to be capable of of holding value, and holding value from let's say a private key linked to a personal identity, which then also can be sort of backed up, or what, so some kind of way that if John Doe loses his private key, that he's not completely disappeared from the earth. We really need to have the solution, and that's where I see that the financial services industry has a big opportunity.
Yes, but they have to get involved in creating standards.
Absolutely.
First, right, and the best practices standards, because if we wait for the regulators, it's going to be.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Yeah.
And this is the case. Mark, thank you so much for all these insights. Of course, I will share with our audience the links to your books and your LinkedIn, and I look forward to speaking to you later, let's say in a year, to see what has happened from all that is happening today and what we're talking about today, because there is so much happening in the market, right?
Absolutely, and that sounds like a great idea, Afi, and thank you very much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.